what we had planned for today, what I wrote down for today.
Yeah.
Wait, what random person? What?
No, you spelled person wrong.
Oh, that's not surprising. When I type really fast, my brain gets it, but my fingers don't always. Okay, do you want me to do the intro, and then we'll just like dive into stuff?
Sure.
Just like start
whatever.
having. See where the
What are we
conversation
talking about
is.
today? Wait, hold on.
That's why I was gonna tell you about why I wanted to talk about it.
This is a deep topic.
I know. So thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Be More podcast. I am Brittany.
I'm Maria. And why do you do this every week?
What?
I'm gonna start right now. Okay, and then just
I don't want to give you the opportunity to I don't know.
Like be awkward about it, even though, yeah. Well, before we get into our topic, again, Black Lives Matter. This is probably gonna be constant for the next couple of weeks. But again, I'll put in the link in the description there's still petitions to sign, places to donate, resources and all that stuff. So.
And as a second side note to this,
yeah.
I think the reason why we have to keep bringing it up is because if you're not aware of it, the more and the more and the more that people are talking about Black Lives Matter, it's devastating that the more and the more and the more that violent acts against people of color are happening. And they're predominantly happening in the South. Multiple things have happened in the last week alone that have just been outright
brutal. It's barbaric what's happening.
Right.
And it's the third week. And I actually read a quote the other day. It's Black Lives Matter is a movement, not a moment. So this will go on. I
was listening to an interesting podcast episode on NPR where they were talking about the history of policing in the country. It was really interesting to listen to it, and it gave me a lot of perspective about, you know how you're walking down a pathway, and I'm gonna give you an analogy. You're walking down a pathway, but then you notice another clearing that needs to be brushed off, and that's actually the right way to go. If that makes sense, or it's a better sense of direction if you head that way versus where you're going. You're constantly clearing off the clearing out the brush and the stuff that's in your way, and learning more as you're traveling in a different direction. I think that was a moment of that for me. It's funny that if you look at the correlations between when slavery ended and when policing started, they're very that just blew my mind. And then hearing a lot, especially, and I feel I feel very out of touch with understanding all of that and seeing all of that because of where we live. It's a different perspective when you grow up in the South. And I want to hear more from those voices, and I want to hear more about how things happened in that time. So that was super interesting to me. What's the most frustrating and the most heart-wrenching part to me is that if you take the people of color who are in the center, right, they're fighting and pushing towards the changing of the police, right, and the changing of the system, but at the same time while they're pushing forward,
particularly the Black community. I think also just as a side for you too, I read this as as this all develops, people of color can mean there's a bunch of different races under that scope. So
that's true.
I've been now focusing on saying Black when it is a Black movement or a Black issue.
Very true.
Very true. People of color, it's an overarching thing, but now I think I'm leaning more towards BIPOC, which is Black Indigenous people of color.
Yeah.
Just as a side. This is all
you're right.
Education wise. So
you're right. So. Because the fight, at the end of the day, the fight still comes down to the fight against the change of the system, and the system that was created was against Black people.
Correct.
So you're right. So it's what's bothers me so much about it is that Black people stand at the center, and even if they have other people of color and other white allies, whatever allies they have there, they're pushing against the system, right?
Yeah.
But then at the same time, whoever's not an ally that's pushing with them is standing behind them. So also attacking them. With what we're seeing, especially in acts that have been coming out in the last week. I had this moment during the week where it consistently reminds you that you won't know what that experience is like, right? But you try to have a level of, you'll never understand, but you want to be in support. And I had an experience during the last week where I went out to see like my first client in person, which was super weird in and of itself. And I was driving fast because it was me and I was driving fast.
Yeah.
And I had a police officer like pull out of like, I didn't even know where they came from. I had no idea where they came from. Pull out of like a lot, I guess, and driving behind me. And I wasn't driving far over the speed limit, but I was driving faster than the speed limit.
Yeah.
And I was like hit with the feeling that I always get whenever there's a cop nearby me, which is like a level of anxiety, right? And I had a moment while I was driving and thinking to myself and realizing, the worst that would happen to me in this situation, the anxiety that I feel is like, I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want to get a ticket. I don't want to have this interaction because it's uncomfortable. But I will never be in a position where my only relevant experience would be I get pulled over, I get a ticket. That's like the worst that would probably happen. I would never be in an experience where if I get pulled over, I could die. Yeah, I could die. Yeah. I could get killed. And that hit me in a place where that's an experience that Black people are having. Like that is the experience that Black people are having that they're trying to be heard about. And it's enough to say like those differences, but to be in a moment where you are terrified, right? Where you're really scared and you're having no interaction with a police officer, or you're having whatever interaction with the authority of the system. And you're a white person, to think, okay, I'm scared and about to have a panic attack because this is my extent, right? This was the extent of what could happen. But to be able to see very clearly, like, the extent of what could happen to me is nowhere near what would happen to somebody who was a Black person who was driving the car. And like, then I started going into situations of like, if I wasn't doing anything wrong, right? Like I could have been a Black person in the car who wasn't even speeding, and that could have been the situation. You know what I mean? So I started to dive into that, a lot of that myself. And I've been watching some very interesting conversations that have been coming out online as well. But yeah, that's where my mind has been in all of it this week. That it's like
ever evolving. It's a lot to take in, and like it's a lot to educate yourself on. So, which is why every week I'm probably just be like, this is still happening, y'all.
Keep learning and trying to
keep being aware
and support and
just try and practice anti-racism. It's just not enough to say I'm not racist. Like, you should act upon.
I feel like in that moment, if we say like, well, I'm not racist, then you act like you're not responsible. Like you have you're not taking ownership of the privilege that you have and the role that you have in the system too.
Anyways, so not today's topic again.
Not today's topic at all. What we're going to talk about today. So let me give you a little background. So somebody brought this up in a professional setting for like a group of people that I work with. I was talking about like the concept of Ikigai.
Ikigai is a Japanese concept that means a reason for being. Is it that?
Like purpose. Yeah, the center of your purpose. This is the book that was referenced that someone was talking to a group of professionals about. And in the book, they wanted to discover like why within, I think it's Japanese, I want to say Japanese monks. I could be totally wrong on that and confusing my concepts, but they wanted to find out why people had such longer lifespans. And they traced it back to these people who had lived for a long time, and they had conversations with them, and they found that they had this kind of formula for the way that they lived their life. And then it goes into like the diagram, right? Like the concept of being able to put your passions, your missions, your work, and your profession all into one thing. And like when all of those can overlap and live in harmony, that's when you reach that level of having your reason for being and everything's in harmony, and then you're able to live longer.
Gotcha.
So I just thought this was an interesting, super interesting concept. I feel like I very much am in a place right now where I'm trying to figure out what the heck all the pieces are that go into that. Every person has their own value system that they work upon, right? Everybody has their own, but at the end of the day, like, and we all have our ways that we define what it would be to be happy. But at the end of the day, we all have, like we've talked about Maslow's level of hierarchy, like the basic needs, like we all also have those. So in a lot of ways, all of those things can overlap, but what we do get to kind of, and this, I feel like this diagram kind of puts those things together in terms of like, not only what you need, but how you service the world.
Which I think a lot of people need to understand that too. like your happiness isn't just you, it's also like for the people around you. Like
I talked about this in something recently also, where having that level of understanding of it being about, it's not just about you.
Yeah.
Right. Like we live in a world that tells us all that matters, everything that you need, you can reach out to at the end of your arm, right? Like you don't need to have anything else. And that all of the sense of connected that we need to be is like available for us in technology. And then there's like what it actually means to be a person and like what humans need.
Yeah.
And like the difference between, have you seen, do you watch, this is so relevant, do you watch the Marvel show Legion?
No.
Oh, dude. Okay, talk about like, taking it to another level. So Dan and I were watching and then got super behind, but we watched a new episode from the last season that came out. There was a moment where there was this girl who could, now we're talking superheroes here, but like not in the sense of being superheroes in this context, but they're talking like mutants more or less. There's this girl who's a time traveler who comes from like her very distant life and is talking to this man who has like these greater like psychological capabilities, and he is talking to her and is saying to her like, how are you feeling? And she's like, I'm fine. And he's like, he waits and he says, how are you feeling? And like she starts to tear up, and she had like a very regimented life, like she was very like minimal, not emotional, and he finally says it to her, how are you feeling? And she says, you know, she is a very wealthy father, and she's like, my dad collects all of these robots, and sometimes at night I'll go into the room and I just stand as still as possible and pretend I'm a robot. And like that concept, which is just like, holy crap. But that concept comes up later on when, like, of course, the guy that asked her how she was feeling, like there are people after him, and she like crossed paths with those people, and they're like, why are you helping him? And she's like, because he's a man and all of us are robots. And like because he has that level of awareness and he wants to connect, like just these things, like this sense of humanness. And she felt so detached from that, and that she had a desire to be back attached with that. And I feel like that is like this is me reaching here, but I feel like that is like a greater sense of like us as a community. I feel like we're being pushed towards that sense of like being a robot, lacking emotion, not being able to comprehend or understand our emotion, not being able to respond to things appropriately, and just being really detached from our physical, mental, and spiritual selves. And being put into a situation where we don't have any sense of this. It's the Ikigai idea.
I think it's generational though. I feel like the younger generation is more grasping towards being human again. You know what I'm saying? Like I feel like they're more emotional, which is great, because then they can probably achieve this better than like the boomers and like probably like us millennials, you know, because we still try and just be, we still try and conform. I feel like a few of us here and there.
Yeah, and it's hard. It's like that's a battle. Like that's a battle in and of itself, right? How do you be human in a world that's built for robots, in a sense, right?
That's so automated now, and like efficiency over anything,
Right. How do you have human in that? And I think that's why I gravitated towards wanting to know more about this concept. Have you read the book, The Go-Giver?
No.
There's a bunch of different like strands of how the story is told and the settings of the story is told, but the one that I read is based on like the professional experience.
Okay.
And it talks about how you are not paid because of what you do. You do, and then the byproduct of you servicing is how you get paid. If that makes sense. Like, it's not just about exchanging your time for money. It's about you actually have to do something in service of other people and have an impact and have a difference. And like, that's the actual
your deliverable, like how,
like your service and your being involved in something and your being attached to that greater sense of something bigger than yourself is actually the way that you're compensated. But like, money is a byproduct of that. I related to that because that's what's important. But it's like that again, like that double-sided coin, because you need money in this world. You need money in this world. Like that's the only way the world works. So how do you find the ways to be able to bring together all of these concepts and still be able to have the humanness? So I liked that concept, right? Like, so let's talk about the diagram for the people who can't see the diagram.
For sure.
So for like the people who are listening to us on SoundCloud. So Where do you start in describing this? Okay.
I think so. So there's 4 big circles, right? There's 4 friggin' big circles that intersect. It's like a Venn diagram, but
Yes.
4.
Yes.
And the 4 big ones say what you love, what the world needs, what you can be paid for, and what you're good at.
Yes. And
then
okay. So then they overlap in what you love and what the world needs becomes your mission, your personal mission.
Yep.
What the world needs and what you can be paid for becomes your vocation.
Mm-hmm.
What you can be paid for and what you're good at becomes your profession. And then what you're good at and what you love is your passion.
Yeah. Which I can agree with those.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with those too. Now, I get a little confused on the bottom half of it and like the terms of the difference between the profession and the vocation. Because I guess I never separated them before.
I mean,
I always saw them as one.
Really? Because sometimes I can see them, I have more, I guess, because vocation, to me, whenever I hear vocation, it's like, I can picture like a priest. You know what I'm saying? Like, what? Or like, my mom says her line of work is a vocation more than a profession.
Got it.
I mean, then again, she is good at it, so it's like, but she sees it
so where they overlap.
Like, yeah. So, I mean, it does overlap at some point, right?
Yeah. I guess it also depends on.
Yeah.
I guess it also depends on like what you're doing, right? So like for me, I guess I would get confused. Actually, maybe it's a little easier for me to break it down because of the multitude of things that I do. But like teaching, I think is like the skill set that I've developed is something I could be paid for and something I'm good at. So I guess my profession would be within that, like teaching.
Yeah.
But the specifics of like what the world needs and what I could be paid for, I guess, is like the way that I utilize my teaching, right? And like how I can offer those services to a greater purpose from the vocation.
Yeah.
So I guess that makes sense. And I could say that with your mom too, right? Like her profession and her vocation would be the same thing then.
Right. She just views it more as a vocation than a profession. I think it's all relative.
Yeah, which is why I said this is all like super personal. And this is like a part of the having that level of awareness and making the assessment for yourself. But then going even further, so you have, once you merge those bigger circles together, you have the 4 intersections of passion, mission, profession, and vocation. And then, oh my God, how do I?
So
I don't even know what is overlapping over what. I don't know how.
So your passion, right? And your mission, when they overlap, I think this is what's happening here. It becomes, there's a whole sentence. It says delight and fullness, but no wealth.
Right. So your level of fulfillment comes from when your passion and your mission merge.
Right. And then when your mission and vocation merge, it's excitement and complacency, but sense of uncertainty.
Okay, so pause. We have to dive into that more.
Pause. We gotta unpack that shit.
Let's read that again for our friends in the back and mostly for us.
So your mission, right, which is what you love and what the world needs, when it merges with your vocation, I really have to break it down to this. Your vocation, which is what you can be paid for and what the world needs, right? Excitement and complacency, but sense of uncertainty.
Maybe you're uncertain because you don't think you're good at it, because that's the thing that's lacking.
Oh, that's the one that's lacking, I guess.
Right? So like if you look at the top where passion and mission are overlapping, you're missing getting paid for it. So you're not getting wealth. So I guess when you look at the inside, you have to look at more at what you're lacking then. And then if you're looking at where mission and vocation overlap, you're excited because you're doing something you love and like it's what the world
needs.
But at the same time, you're uncertain and maybe you're complacent because you're not actually good at it or you're not building your skills to develop it.
Okay, that makes sense. If you're not good at something, but you feel still, I guess a little bit fulfilled because you like it and whatnot, like you're still uncertain. Because like, am I really good at this? Like, I feel like the imposter syndrome. It's like
that, dude. Every day.
Every day.
Yeah. Okay. It's the imposter syndrome versus like your actual ability to be able to assess whether you're good at it or not.
Yeah.
And I feel like imposter syndrome can fit into that. But that's where that level of uncertainty comes from.
Okay, cool. All right. So your vocation and profession, when they're together, or whatever, it says comfortable but feeling of emptiness.
Right. Because you're lacking what you love.
Right. Okay. And then your passion and profession, the intersection is satisfaction but feeling of uselessness. Wow.
Because you're not making an impact on the world, right? Like this is amazing, right? Like I was like, I mean, I still have to, every time I have to go through it, I'm like, all right, wait, we got to break this down again because I'm confused. But I mean, I feel
clearly
like
that last one hit me.
I
was like, oh.
You got quiet, but I wasn't sure why. So I was like, let me just keep going.
I was like, oh.
Okay, wait, why? Do you want to talk about that?
Oh, I mean, like, no, I love what I do as a profession, and I feel like I'm good at it. I mean, I'm getting validation at work that I'm good at what I do, which is great.
Right.
I mean, like, in terms of, like, being an accountant, like, does the world need that? I mean, I'm not sure, but, like, I'm supplementing that slowly with, like, this podcast and other shit. So it's like, slowly I'll get there. You know what I'm saying? So.
Yeah. I feel like if we go back to the aspect of, like, the world we want to live in versus the world we actually live in, like, you are definitely helping people with the world, like, the reality of the world they have to live in.
Yeah.
Right? And what you're able to do.
Like, I love my job.
So I think that,
yeah. But is it, like, especially during Black Lives Matter, like, is this what the world needs right now? You know what I'm saying? Like, and also it depends on the day. Sometimes I'm like, no, I'm doing, you know, what the world needs sometimes. Like, for my clients, like, they need this. Like, so, yeah, it just depends on the day.
Yeah. I think that's what we might have, like, a commonality in that, in, like, wanting to do this podcast, in the fact of wanting to have more there.
Yeah.
Right. Because this might, thankfully, like, us having these conversations already falls into, like, what we love. Like, we like to do this. We haven't reached the paid for part yet, so we're not going to from it, but that's why we have the jobs that we have, right? Like, we're not doing it for that part.
Right.
That would be great if we could develop into that. That'd be awesome. But, and I think that, like, the level of, like, what we're good at in terms of, I think we're good at having these conversations. I think we're good about educating ourselves and developing awareness. So I feel like you're right. I feel like by using this podcast, you can supplement having that ability to do that. You can bring yourself to that level of having a reason for being, and you don't just have to find it within your career. You can, or within your profession or your vocation, you can find it by, like you said, supplementing other activities into your life that give you meaning and are something that you love. I think it's sad that we might not, I mean, and if you have an opinion, if you're somebody who works and you feel like you reach this in whatever you're doing for work, one thing that you're doing, like, reach out to us and talk to us about it. But it seems sad to me that we might live in a world that separates things, they can compartmentalize things so much that we can't have them all come together in one setting.
Right, like, you have to, again, supplement.
Right, or at least one, okay, let me say this. At least not one job, right?
Right, I mean, for us, obviously some other people can justify that their job hits every.
Yeah, oh, I'm sure. But at the end of the day, like, the way that I see it, I'm gonna get real into this, like, and I still have some jobs that I work outside of what I do for myself, but and, like, the businesses I'm growing, but at the end of the day, I see it as, I might love what I'm doing when I'm working for somebody else. I might be good at it. I might be getting paid for it, but I can't drive the direction of what the world needs. That's because I'm not building my dream. I'm building somebody else's dream.
Yeah.
So in terms of the being able to take on a leadership position and actually driving which way, like, the Ikigai would go, you don't get to do that in a job.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So I mean, please tell me I'm wrong, and let's guide more people into that job. If somebody's out there and is like, oh, I get to make a lot of decisions based on this, and, like, no one oversees where we go in terms of, like, no one's leading me but me. It's great to have leaders around you to look up to, but, like, if you're not the person who actually gets to, like, draw the map of where everything is going, then there is easily going to be some, like, those circles are going to start to pull away from one another. You're not going to find that center of that intersection point. But I thought this was super interesting. Aren't you interested?
I am. It's just, like, it's a lot.
I know.
I get it.
It is.
Like, I get it because, like, it makes sense. Like, when you put all these 4 things together, it's like your meaning of life, right? Basically, it literally says Ikigai, a reason for being. It's like, okay, this makes sense. Like, this is what you live for and what makes you happy.
This very much reminds me of the like, the Hindu concept of dharma. I have, like, it's like this level of, like, cosmic law and, like, the work and the law and order and the work you do into it. And I mean, there are a lot of, the way that I see it through, like, a more of a yogic perspective is, like, the work you do with purpose. essentially.
Hmm.
But that's a book that I have too that I have been reading about. But it's interesting to me how a lot of different like cultures and maybe even like religions have their own ways of like defining
happiness,
having that right where you get to having that reason of life and that purpose, and that's what brings you happiness.
You gravitate towards something that makes sense to you for happiness. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah,
like this diagram or whatever, Ikigai, makes sense to me. So like I would probably gravitate towards this compared to some other, like the pyramid. What the hell is it called?
Maslow's
just say,
pyramid hierarchy.
Like it makes sense. That also makes sense, but also like there's other things that Ikigai has that doesn't have that, and it's just like, oh, this makes more sense. You know, like it's just like happiness is such a weighted term.
It is, and it's funny because it's so overrated and underrated at the same time.
I can agree to that. It's like happiness is just as important as like sadness. Like it's nothing like they're at the same level. For me growing up right now, like the older I get, I'm like, happiness is supposed to be fleeting. It's not supposed to be there forever, and so is sadness. So it's like, you know, just getting that balance.
And it's like that constant, I mean, like talk about using the symbols of coming together, like it's like that yin and yang concept. You can't have one without having the other, or you break the cycle. So I think it's relevant. I just maybe I can think of a way to break down why I said that. I feel like the happiness that society tells us is like what we're supposed to be able to attain is what's overrated. And
it's so
and I don't even know how to put maybe that into words anymore, because I feel like it's just like
I feel like
it's just so skewed.
It's so like economical.
Right. Again, it's coming
like
back
so
to that
commercial.
Like, the happiness of being a robot is overrated. Or like the happiness of what it takes to be happy and be within this world that makes us try to seem less human. But then at the same time, that what's underrated is the happiness of just having a human experience, right? Mm-hmm. Like the sake of me, you're right. It comes back to like the finances and the economics of it, right? Like you don't need to be really, really rich to be happy. And a lot of the times when we look at people who are really, really rich, they're not necessarily happy. And like that, what you're looking for, the financial status that you're looking for isn't going to bring you that happiness. But there are also people who, like I have learned for myself that I would rather, I had this conversation with a kid yesterday who's in college, who goes to school in New York, and he's from Dubai, which is another big city. And he was like, I love cities. Like, I know that I want to be in the cities. I love that. And I was like, we are opposite. Like, I thought I loved the cities growing up, and then realized how anxious they made me. And now I would rather live in the woods in a cabin than be in that situation. But like, it's so personal. And we had more of the conversation about why we feel that way and like what experiences we've had. Me having that and me doing that might make me like spiritually, emotionally happy. But then how do I I had to find the way to sustain it in terms of like being a part of the economics of that. I think it becomes very complicated, but I think what we agree on very much is that like it's individualized, and the second that you stop trying to search for happiness and reach the happiness and attain happiness that's defined by anybody other than just you, not ever going to actually be happy.
No, happiness should be defined by whatever personal experience, and like, you know, it's all within each person. Like happiness is such bullshit. Like the way that it's so portrayed everywhere, it's just like, why? Like it should be a checklist.
I was just having a conversation the other day with, and it's something that I had to experience too when I was facing like my
same.
biggest like depression experiences. Just because you're unhappy doesn't mean you're not grateful. And then if we push this like this sense of unrealistic or toxic happiness on people, that they should always be happy because it could be way worse, then you're like completely distracting from the issue at hand, and you're saying that the issue is not relevant. And it's like, just because you're unhappy doesn't mean you're not grateful. Now, if you're unhappy and you're ungrateful for what you have, that's a totally different story. And you're getting in your own way. But I know I catch myself too when I would really start to experience sadness. I would make it worse for myself because I would say, how dare you feel that way? Look at all the things you have to be grateful for. And then you make yourself feel so much worse. And like just being able to say like we need to stop doing that to ourselves. We need to be able to address the actual issues that are at hand that we're experiencing and say it's okay that it's not okay. It's okay that we're not happy right now, because it comes back to what you said, right? We can't have one without the other.
Right. And I hate the idea of like, oh, it could be worse is so ingrained in like I don't know, media.
I feel like I get it from like elders.
Oh yeah, I think it's also a generational
in my
thing.
day, right?
Yeah,
like, in my day, we never would have had, and then you feel bad about it.
Yeah. As a child of immigrant parents, right? Like, I think in your head you're like, your parents came over here for you to have a good life. Like, why do you feel like this is like the end of the world? You know? So it's like, it's all within experience, but then you have to like get out of that mindset and be like, no, it's okay to have like a sad day. Also, like sadness and like the word depression gets thrown around real easy. The sadness and depression are very different. Oh my god! And I think you've talked about this in a earlier episode where it feels like depression's like the sunken place, like from Get Out.
Yeah.
Like that's depression.
Yeah. And I also feel like there's this relevance in being able to say that the world that we live in now, it's harder and harder to grow up without experiencing that. But we have
depression?
like that a lot more people actually experience depression than they're aware of, but they just they just think of it as like a deep level of sadness, right? Like, so that's something too that I want to be able to address. I talk a lot about how I feel like people say, you know, we label something and then we say, if you don't match it with anything, with race, with gender, with
relationship,
sexuality, with anything, like we do as, you know, robots. If we don't fit in it exactly, then we don't have the right to say that we experience it or talk about our experiences within it. And I feel like mental health becomes one of those things, like depression becomes one of those things. If you're not dealing with it, if your depression doesn't look like this, or if your lack of happiness doesn't look like this, or if your happiness looks like this, you don't have the right to talk about it. I think it's frustrating because then it just keeps pushing all of those circles further and further away from one another. This is how I got to where I got in what I was dealing with my mental health, because and like my lack of happiness is because it's not that I didn't want to talk about my experiences. I just never felt like I could. I never felt
you
like
didn't have the tools you didn't have the tools or like the resources to like figure out how to even have that conversation.
Right. But I also didn't feel like I could, which was like the bigger problem. Like I felt like I didn't have the right to, because mine didn't look like that, or mine didn't look like that, or mine didn't look like that.
That's also, and it goes back to like this is all individual. Like, right. That's what science says, that this is what depression looks like, but like not really, not for everyone. This is just the average.
Yeah, but it's not even science. It's like okay, if we're gonna talk really on the scale of like society and like our pop culture and the major people that could get picked out for things, like if we are constantly told like this celebrity or this doctor or this person, this is how they have it, this is how they have it, this is how they have it, and we don't look or feel like one of those three people, then we don't have the right to talk about it. And it's total bullshit. Like it's total bullshit, because we all, especially now when those higher, like we're being asked to live within a world that seems more robotic and less human, we're going to be put in more situations where we're likely to feel those things and we're likely to experience those things. And we need to be able to have those open like spaces to communicate it. Let's put like super simple. Video games make you happy, right? Like I'm sure playing Animal Crossing would probably make me happy too, from the wonderful things that I heard about it. But like
it helps so games, much. I will say Animal Crossing, just because you said, helps so much with depression, anxiety, because it's little things. When you accomplish little things, you just feel happy. Like you're like, oh, I did something in a video. Like with any video game, with any plot, like you get a win. You're like, oh shit, like I accomplished something. Like that's why video games for me, because I can accomplish something while I'm sitting down. Like it's just like, oh, I did something today. So go on.
It's funny because I've heard people talk about Animal Crossing in the opposite and say like it's just as stressful to play that game because it's based off of real life, and you literally have to like do the same things that you would do in real life in the game to be able to advance.
So I will say though, I get like that with that game sometimes, because then it becomes a chore. But then that's when I'm like, all right, you need to like stop playing this game, because now it's not becoming a source of like entertainment and happiness. It's becoming a part of your daily routine you don't even want to do anymore. So like there is a balance with video games too. Like, even video games,
Yeah.
fucking yin and yang. Like, if I binge a video game for so long, if I clock in 100 hours on the video game, I'm not gonna enjoy it. Like, then you have to step away for a few days and then just go back. Like, it's a balance. So I
Which is
totally get
literally
it.
so funny because that's how I get to feel with work sometimes.
Yeah. With
Like
any
you do it,
work,
you do
I
it,
feel
you
like,
do it. Even if it's something you love, you do it, you do it, you do it, and then you're like, oh, I need a break.
yeah, you need a break, which is why vacations are a thing. Like, to
Which is
get
why
away.
everybody, please
Take some time off.
stop acting like coronavirus isn't a thing, because the more you
that's
act like it's not a thing and you go out and do whatever you want to, the worse of an impact we're going to face in the fall. The conversations and the thing that kills me, of course they're still talking about this, the thing that kills me the most with all of this is that I have children who ask me questions relevant to corona that are like and I don't even know, like, there is no good answer to give. Like, will they ask me, like, will I be able to go back to school ever again? Will I, like, am I not supposed to see my friends at all? Like, how are they supposed to, and I know it's complicated. I know everybody has to take it personally. Like, another personal experience, but like, if we keep, like, the summer is going to be like a blip and everybody's going to just pretend like the last 6 months didn't happen.
It's still
and
happening.
Then the fall is going to come and it's going to be
worse,
absolutely devastating.
And like, I feel for those kids that are like, oh, like, school was their one place to like get away from home, and like, if they don't go back to school,
having happiness.
Yeah, and if they don't go to school, like that, I know these poor kids just going through all this shit. Like, it sucks.
I know. I don't know how that. I talk about like there is no way that children are not having these experiences of like these depressive states and maybe
they don't know it, but that's the thing. Like, they don't have the
and they're not able to. They're not able to talk about it, or they're not able to address it and have the awareness of seeing it. I think that we're going to have a whole new breed of like mental health and mental things that we're going to have to address that we don't even know about yet and we don't know how to deal with yet. And that's what's scarier is like just like with what happened with Corona. Like, Corona came and we didn't know how to deal with it. We were standing here and then Corona came and now Corona's over here and now we're chasing it. It's going to be the same thing with mental health.
Yeah.
Because we are chasing that. We've been chasing that shit for years, and now it's just further in front of us. And now we've
been chasing a lot of shit for years.
But I think that it makes me more grateful for us being able to do this.
Oh yeah.
To have this podcast,
it helps us
to
out
have these
mentally.
conversations. Yeah, it helps us out in like aligning those circles, and it helps us out, I think, with handling this stuff. And I really, 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 I do believe that it's going to have a difference some way, shape, or form on some other people. I think that we can have those, like, that's the beautiful thing. Like, if you are somebody who right now, who doesn't feel like Marie and I talked about those circles and you're like, absolutely not. I feel like I have no purpose, which is not what our intention was. But if you do feel that way, you never have to feel like it's too late to do something about it.
No. Life shouldn't, this is a generational thing too. Like, you're not supposed to have a successful career by 30. Like, if you're 50 and you have and that's when you like have your successful career, like, okay, that's great. Like, there's no certain timeline where you have to hit certain things in your life. Like, I think that's bullshit too. That aids to the problem of like not attaining this commercial happiness.
Yeah. And like the way that you define success, just like the way that you define happiness, is going to be personal to you. And like those, like you said, that timeline is totally relevant to you. Yeah, and it's just, I feel like it pulls back to say, like, the more and more the society tells you what you should and how you should and why you should, the more and more you have to be able to push back and say, nope, this is mine.
Nope. Yep.
Like, you just have to take ownership of that, and go from there.
But it's scary though. Duh. Like, to shift your whole mindset. Duh.
The scariest thing to me ever.
Yeah.
And like the moments that I keep having, oh my God, about, is realizing for yourself that you cannot blame anybody else.
Oh my God.
Yourself that like,
and even just like holding yourself accountable and being like, oh my God.
Realizing for yourself, like, it happens in all those really scary movies, right? Where like, or like those like deep mind movies where there's like a bad guy and like his face is covered, and then all of a sudden you see it's you. Yeah. Right? Like I've had dreams of that. So the having that moment where you realize, where you feel like there's all this influence on you, and then you actually get to stand up and say, nope, like I'm going to be the one who have influence on myself. That is a scary ass moment. But like, the only way it gets better is by having that moment and then actually doing something about it afterwards.
You just have to realize that like you're stuck with you. like that realization that is just
until
like,
the end, you are guaranteed to be stuck with you.
Like that realization alone, once you get past that, then I feel like people can more easily define their happiness.
The ways I feel like you can find your own personal happiness if you like here's an exercise for people who might want to do it. Like if you write out the things that you value, right? The things that are of importance to you. And I don't mean like physical, like I don't necessarily just mean like
tangible things, like
that's literally the word that was about physical. Materialistic things. Like I don't just mean those things. I mean like what matters to you in your life. And then you talk about like what experiences you want to be able to have and how you want to feel and what you hope to see in the future. Like that's how you can kind of sculpt out the happiness, what happiness means to you. And then the way that you actively attain that, you're actually also not going to be happy when you get there, right?
No.
You're going to get there and you're going to be like, okay, well now I'm here, now what? You actually are going to find happiness in the process of actually doing the work that carves out that sculpture of how you define your happiness.
Like happiness is just like it's a journey. And then once you hit the end point, then you have to start all over again.
It's the process. It's not like the end result.
Process.
Totally.
Yeah. It's again, it's like a fleeting moment. It's not supposed to be there. You're not supposed to stay happy. Like you're supposed to stay at like, you know, a functional, well, you know, you can
and that's
functioning well-being.
So I have I've been working on like a specific, we talked about this a little bit, like how we were going to do this. I've been working on a specific like brand that relates to like everything we've been talking about. And it literally is about that. So it's going to be called Empowered to Positive.
Mm-hmm.
And it's literally about that, right? Like it's not about the end result. It's about the journey you're taking and how you're addressing the actions you're taking and what you're doing to get there and like everything that falls in between. Because you're not always going to be happy. Can you always try to help yourself be in a place where you have the strength and stability to be able to say, I want this to happen, or I want to be positive, or I want to see what this can do for me? Like, can you have the ability to look at something realistically, not bullshitty, and say, where do I go from here with the intent of having it be of service to you and somebody else? Totally. Mm-hmm. Are you still going to have shitty days where you literally I literally had a day last week where that one day where it downpoured, where there was like a hurricane for no reason.
Yeah, random.
I was in my car taking my car for a drive because who does that? We're in quarantine. And I needed to do that because my car battery has been dying. And I literally just sat in the car and just let myself sit in it because like the sound of that rain, like you just, doesn't mean you're not going to have those days.
Yeah,
right?
no.
You're going to have those days. But the whole point is like we talked about in the beginning, like where I literally don't want to be on my phone. I don't want to do anything. I want to be detached. You're going to have those days, but then what do you do after it? What do you do about it? How do you take care of yourself in those moments? That's the stuff that matters.
That is, because there's a fine line of also just sitting in your sadness for an extended amount of time and then actually doing something about it. Mm-hmm. Well, a lot of people just don't sit in their sadness.
And it's a super uncomfortable place.
It's so uncomfortable. That was a thing I did before I went to therapy, and I like sat and tried to understand it, which I mean is healthy. But then when you sit under it for too long, that's when it gets problematic.
And it comes back to what you said too, right? We don't talk about the tools and the strategies that you have to actually to move yourself out of it or move yourself through it. Mm-hmm. I've been thinking a lot about the saying, when you're going through hell, keep going. You've never heard of that saying before? Yes, I've been thinking about it a lot, and it is about that. And like I said before, like when you get into that place, like if all you do in that place is tell yourself how it's like your own fault that you're there, and you like ruminate about all the things that got you there, you just
start to resent yourself.
Right. Which is not a fun place to be.
Let's not do that.
But yeah, we're all going to have our own experiences in it. And
it's good to feel though. It's good to be understanding of like your feeling of like negativity and like, but like it's, because then your process of being more positive will be more fulfilling. Because you can be like, oh, I started from here and then, got to over here. Like, it's just,
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. See, and you were like, how are we going to talk about happiness? And I knew we were going to get oh, shit. I knew we were gonna. Oh, my headphone fell. I knew we were gonna solid a conversation.
I mean, yeah. I mean, happiness. Like, I mean, even because your question was what makes you happy, and I'm like, but again, like with anything, it's an individual thing. You're not supposed to have like a solid.
I was asking it more as like a. I was asking it more as like a what makes you happy, not like.
I don't understand that, but like I meant like the whole topic of this. Like it's all an individual.
Thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted to talk about it, because I want my hope for what we do and the conversations we have and like everything that we do with this podcast is that we just bring the fact that these conversations happen to the surface,
awareness of it,
right, so that other people can have that for themselves if they need to, like to just have that relevance, to see where it fits into life and that it's possible, because they're important things that we don't talk about enough.
No, and also you should be aware of what makes you happy.
And what makes you not happy.
And that too.
Direct yourself away from that stuff.
Right, you should direct yourself away from whatever makes you anxious. If it makes you anxious, put a fucking boundary up. I don't know. Like, things that I'm still learning. It's very hard. That might have
to be a whole other episode. Talking about boundaries.
Boundaries? I couldn't tell you what one looks like. Like, I'm still working on this.
That'll be a future episode. We have to talk about boundaries, because we both have like very different journeys with boundaries and like are both still figuring out how the heck do we do this.
I still figure out how to define that. Boundaries also can like correlate with like your happiness. Like you need boundaries. Apparently that's a thing.
Again, things I wish someone told me when I was 5 that I could have just
honestly.
Like you try to build. Oh man.
Try to build boundaries when you're 27. With
analogies on analogies. If you don't have the basement and the foundation of your house being built, it's not going to stand tall for very long. That's all I have to say.
You'll have to rebuild and rebuild.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh man. Oh, I'm so happy we did this.
Are you?
Yeah. I think this is super important to right now. I think happiness is maybe more of a relevant term to people to have the awareness of more than ever. So I hope that this episode can be something to just make people feel like they're not alone in it.
Yeah, I think as like an exercise, people should like write down what makes them happy. And again, not the tangible shit.
And if you do have tangible shit that makes you happy, that's cool. But like,
I mean, yeah, video games is probably like, or like books could be like part of my list. But like things like,
I think that's another boundary. Maybe that's something we can cover too. Like having boundaries and like sense of detachment and not feeling like you need to just have happiness with material things.
I mean, yeah, that too. But obviously, material things can lead to happiness. So we're not knocking that out. But if they're coupled with other things that are not tangible, that's great too. Like, you know.
Boundaries will be on a future episode. Ooh, also, we have a lot, Marie and I talked about this before starting the episode. We have a lot of people who are going to be joining us. A lot of
we're going
to be talking about a bunch of things all through the summer. So continue to join in the conversation with us as we head out into summer weather. Well,
crazy.
We're heading out, wear a mask, but as we head out the next couple of months of summer.
Agreed. Definitely wear a mask. Stay, socially distant from people. Stay safe. Goodbye.